What's going on, y'all? Attorney Tom here with another USCSB React. Today's video is titled Mixed Connection Toxic Result. As always, stick around to the end of the video where I am going to assign my percentages of fault. Let's jump into it.
October 21st, 2016. The MGPI processing facility in Atchison, Kansas. An unintended chemical reaction resulted in a dense cloud containing toxic chlorine gas and other chemicals that drifted into the community, leaving over 140 people with reported injuries.
Very interesting. I've been litigating a case almost exactly like this for the past couple of years. And while I'm not going to discuss anything confidential because the litigation is still ongoing, essentially what happened is a refinery had an explosion and it caused a chemical called butadiene to be released into the entire town, affecting a lot of people. Let's keep going.
The incident occurred during a routine chemical delivery when two incompatible chemicals, sulfuric acid and sodium hypochlorite, were inadvertently mixed, forming the toxic cloud. The incident occurred in a section of the plant that uses sodium hypochlorite, or bleach, as well as sulfuric acid. These two chemicals, when combined, can form chlorine gas and other chemical compounds. On the morning of the incident, a truck from a chemical distribution company, Harcross Chemicals, arrived at MGPI to complete a routine delivery of sulfuric acid. After reviewing paperwork in the control room, an MGPI facility operator escorted the driver to a locked loading area. There, chemicals are transferred from trucks into the facility through piping, called fill lines, to several large storage tanks in an outdoor tank farm. The MGPI operator unlocked the sulfuric acid fill line for the driver to connect the truck's unloading hose. The operator remembers pointing out the correct fill line to the driver before he returned to his workstation. The driver, however, does not recall hearing the operator identify the fill line.
So issue one, the operator claims that he pointed out the correct fill line, but the driver doesn't remember that. And that brings us to important point number one. Humans make mistakes. It is foreseeable that when you are dealing with humans, especially a human who does not work at your facility, such as an independent chemical truck driver, that they might not hear things or mishear things or not know what they're doing. So the operator of the plant should always be present when they are doing these sort of chemical exchanges to make sure the chemicals are onboarded into the property the correct way. Also, I'm going to use my magic USCSB powers to predict that one of the contributory factors in this incident were that both lines were so close to each other and it doesn't really look like that they're properly marked. And if I'm right, and I say this in every video, USCSB, please do a collab with me. Even though they totally won't because they're supposed to be unbiased and I'm obviously a very biased catastrophic personal injury lawyer who sues these people. Let's keep going.
Unknown to the operator, the sodium hypochlorite fill line was also unlocked.
Okay, and obviously it was unlocked when it shouldn't have been unlocked. That's very obvious. Obviously bad. Knowledge hammer.
And the two lines, which were only 18 inches apart, looked similar and were not clearly marked.
I don't know. To me, that looks more like 36 inches, 54 inches. If I ever retire from being a lawyer, I'm going to be a USCSB agent.
The driver connected his truck's sulfuric acid hose to the sodium hypochlorite line, and sulfuric acid began flowing inside. He then returned to the cab of his truck. Shortly before 8 a.m., a greenish-yellow gas began flowing from the bulk tank of sodium hypochlorite. The driver noticed the cloud in his truck's side view mirror and attempted to return to the connection area to turn off the flow of sulfuric acid, but the gas overwhelmed him. He then ran to the passenger side of the truck to close a valve that could halt the flow, but he was prevented from doing so by the gas. Instead, he ran away from the cloud and escaped to a separate area of the facility.
Okay, next issue is, does the driver have a duty to have a correct PPE? Is it foreseeable that a toxic cloud of gas is going to form, in which case you maybe put on a ventilator where you could then go and turn off the valve manually? In the alternative, is there some sort of kill switch that you can design by either the truck driver or the facility where a chemical exchange is going wrong? It automatically gets shut off without the need for human intervention. Remember, it is foreseeable that an adverse chemical reaction will take place. So then it becomes a question of mitigation. When something takes place, do you have the proper safety equipment and procedures to combat it?
At about the same time, toxic gases entered the facility control room through the building's ventilation system. MGPI operators preparing for shift change in the control room were immediately overcome by the toxic gas. Because the operators had a practice of locking respirators between shifts, some were unable to access their respirators before evacuating the building. With no other way to stop the flow other than closing manual valves on the fill line or truck, or by triggering one of the truck's emergency shutoffs, the sulfuric acid continued to enter the sodium hypochlorite tank for nearly 45 minutes.
So he said the truck did have an emergency shutoff, but obviously if you're not able to get to the truck, what can you do? And I'm pretty confident in arguing there's probably not a safer alternative for the truck, because obviously if you don't have access to the truck, what can the truck driver do? So then it falls on the facility. Do they have a way to kill or stop the transfer of chemicals when that transfer is going wrong? And obviously, if we go back here, all the operators were forced to evacuate. And I don't know if they were necessarily forced to evacuate because their respirators were locked. For instance, if they weren't locked, could they have gone back to the control room and finished their duties? If so, then the issue is having their respirators locked. So that's totally an issue. Let's keep going.
The sulfuric acid continued to enter the sodium hypochlorite tank for nearly 45 minutes until emergency responders shut down the flow. Approximately 4,000 gallons of sulfuric acid combined with 5,800 gallons of sodium hypochlorite, causing a large, dense cloud containing chlorine gas, which soon drifted off-site. MGPI employees were evacuated from the site, and 11,000 Atchison citizens were advised to either shelter in place or evacuate. Over 140 people, including MGPI employees, emergency responders, the truck driver, and members of the public, sought medical attention, some requiring hospitalization.
So this is fairly interesting, or at least I think it's fairly interesting from a legal perspective, even though it's kind of sad. Everybody who was described as injured probably has a potential case, except for first responders. And while this is not definite and every situation is different, it's long been held that there is an assumption of the risk if you are a first responder. So for instance, if a firefighter came and was injured by inhaling this smoke, they probably don't have a case. And I don't know why I decided to bring that up. Normally, I talk about the different classifications between employee, independent contractor, neutral third party, such as an ordinary civilian, but I've never talked about the duties owed to a first responder before. So now you know.
The CSB identified several human factors deficiencies, which influenced how the operator and driver interacted with the chemical transfer equipment.
Human factors should be carefully considered when identifying hazards, particularly because chemical delivery drivers may not be familiar with the facility's equipment.
For example, at MGPI, the CSB found that the close proximity of the sulfuric acid fill line to the sodium hypochlorite fill line increased the likelihood for workers to make an incorrect connection.
That's why it was important for the operator to be there. That's like the first issue I identified. Also, I'm going to use my magic uscsb powers to predict that one of the contributory factors in this incident were that both lines were so close. And listen, y'all, I get worked up about this because as you can see, these things are so foreseeable. They're so preventable. And I see this day in and day out in my real life job outside of talking to you on the magic screen. It makes me want to pull my hair out.
The CSB also discovered that the two fill lines looked and functioned identically, using the same type of connections. Lastly, the CSB found that of the 5 fill lines in the unloading area, only one was labeled at the point where the hose connected.
A key lesson from our case study is for facilities to evaluate chemical unloading equipment and processes, and implement safeguards to reduce the likelihood of an incident. This should be done while taking into account human factors issues that could impact how facility operators and drivers interact with that equipment.
This can include physically separating fill lines by a discernible distance, selecting hose couplings and fill line connections with unique shapes or colors for each type of chemical.
So that's something we didn't talk about. The connectors. The connectors were the same. It wouldn't necessarily be a design defect because the fill lines work as intended. So this wouldn't be any sort of product liability case, but it's definitely a layer of negligence. If you could have a different connector to prevent the wrong chemical from getting matched up with the wrong fill line, why wouldn't you? Having a connector is literally just having something that is a different shape. Additionally, there are no labels on the pipes as well. You could easily just have a label or a different color of pipe that indicates the correct chemical. All right, y'all, so now it's time to assign the percentages of fault for the situation. But before I give y'all my percentages of fault, leave yours down below in the comments. So there were a ton of negligent actions here, so let's start from the very beginning. Starting with the employee of the operator who let the driver in. The employee left the driver to manually pump the chemicals on his own. On top of that, the line for the sodium hydrochlorite was unlocked. In addition to being unlocked, both fill lines shared the same connectors, no distinguishing marks, and were in close proximity to each other. Further, the employees of the operator did not have access to the correct respiratory equipment because it was locked and they were unable to unlock it. And additionally, there was no automatic kill switch to the function of filling up the fill lines. So this bad chemical reaction just kept on going. The truck driver was negligent as well. He point blank connected the wrong fill line, causing this entire thing. And I would argue that you should absolutely never connect a fill line unless you know with 1,000% certainty that it is the correct one. Further, the truck driver did fail to shut off the valve once he realized that a chemical reaction was going bad because he was blocked out by the chemical smoke. Did he have the correct safety equipment? Perhaps a respirator could have given him access to get to the back of the truck and kill the emergency line or hit the emergency switch to stop the transfer. And y'all, we did not get the full story here. I want to know about the truck driver's training. I want to know about the employees' training. I want to know about their safety procedures. What were their safety procedures? What is the history of safety at the plant? And these are all things that we would figure out in real life. But based on the knowledge that we have, I am going to put 90% of the fault on the operator of the plant and their employees, and 10% of the fault on the driver. I think quite simply, this graphic says it all. The fact that the sodium hydrochlorite fill line was unlocked in such a close proximity and was not labeled is just a disaster waiting to happen. And when you have a disaster waiting to happen or something complicated or hard to decipher such as this, you better be damn sure your employee is there making sure that the driver correctly connects with the appropriate fill line. I mean, damn, even if the operator was there watching the driver connect the fill line, he still might not have caught it because they look the same. So that's it. My analysis, 90-10. They get a knowledge hammer. Talk to y'all later. Bye.
He's a catastrophic injury attorney who accidentally became a YouTuber. Attorney Tom.